7 bone-chilling sleepover horror stories that will haunt you forever. It was supposed to be a night of fun. A typical sleepover to share giggles over popcorn and gossip about crushes. But what unfolded in that dim-lit basement became an experience that would send chills down the spine of anyone who dared hear the tale. As the clock ticked past midnight, the air thickened with a sense of unease, like the heavy silence before a thunderstorm. The shadows loomed larger, creeping closer, as if hungry for the unwitting teens who were blissfully unaware of the night's true nature, a night that would etch itself into their memories forever. Things felt off the moment Sarah's parents left. The walls of that old house whispered secrets, their wooden bones creaking with ghostly echoes. The basement held an energy so palpable, the kids could almost taste the fear. The dusty corners whispered of forgotten stories, and occasionally, a shiver ran down their spines as the flickering light bulb above swayed unsteadily, heightening the atmosphere. Unease curled around them like a thick fog, but the kids shrugged it off, too caught up in their usual shenanigans. Then came the first clue. A strange tapping echoed against the walls. At first, it was just rhythmic enough to be mistaken for the kids messing around, but then it turned erratic, sporadic, unnerving. "Do you hear that?" Jason asked, his voice barely a whisper, as if afraid the noise might hear him. As the 4 of them strained their ears, the tapping transformed into a chilling rustling sound, like fingernails scratching at the wood. Goosebumps prickled on their arms, and a tightness gripped their chests. "Come on, guys, it's just the wind," Sarah forced a laugh, but her voice trembled, not quite reaching her eyes. They were all trying hard to mask their unease, but the energy in the room shifted. It felt thick and electric, like a storm brewing just out of sight. The flickering light bulb above them cast eerie shadows, shifting shapes and figures that played tricks on their imagination. Was there something lurking just outside their sight, waiting and watching? Just then, the room plunged into pitch darkness. The laughter stopped cold. Heartbeats thundered in the silence, and the palpable dread settled over them. "What the hell?" Tim breathed, and in that moment of forced vulnerability, the only reassurance was each other. They could barely make out each other's faces, cold sweat glistening on their foreheads. Fingers intertwined, a circle of strength against the unknown. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. When the lights unexpectedly flickered back to life, the friends erupted in nervous laughter, a temporary balm against the turbulent fear that had bubbled within them. But just as relief washed over their minds, they noticed something that sent them spiraling back into terror. Written in the dust on the basement floor, scrawled like a message from beyond, were chilling words: "Get out." It wasn't just a warning, it was a command. Trembling, they exchanged wide-eyed glances, each of them grappling with an urgent question: who had been down here before them? And could whatever was lurking still be watching? The unseen presence that gripped the air felt closer, heavier, as if waiting for one of them to dare take a step outside the small circle of comfort they had formed. The dawning realization that this wasn't just a prank or a game, panic ignited and sent all 4 scrambling for the stairs. But something deep inside whispered to them, what if they weren't alone? What if whatever had left that message was still there, watching, waiting eagerly for them to make their next move? And with a final glance back into the shadowy space, they felt a chilling sensation that this sleepover nightmare was only just beginning. As they rushed toward the stairs, adrenaline surged through their veins. Heart pounding, Sarah shot a glance over her shoulder, biting her lip. Was that a flicker of movement just beyond the shadows? She felt an icy grip around her chest, but fear propelled her forward, each step echoing like thunder in their ears. "Faster!" Tim urged, his voice trembling. The staircase loomed ahead, hostile and barricaded, as though the house itself resented their presence. They could hear it now, a soft, raspy whisper threading through the air, wrapping around them. It felt like a taunt, or maybe a warning. At the top of the stairs, Sarah yanked the door open, the creaking hinges screaming in protest. They spilled out into the hallway, gasping for the comfort of light that felt so far away. The darkness stretched around them, almost suffocating, wrapping them in a cloak of dread. What was that? Jason asked, his voice a tight whisper as he glanced back, searching the shadows for an unseen enemy. "Let us just get outside," Sarah insisted, darting toward the front door, her feet moving with mindless instinct, but when they reached it, the handle wouldn't turn. Panic washed over her. "It's stuck!" she exclaimed. She pulled again, harder this time, her palms slick with sweat, but it wouldn't budge. As the others crowded behind her, she heard that whisper again, a hushed, sinister sound that crawled under her skin. "Maybe it's locked," Tim suggested, his mouth dry. Why would her parents lock the door? Sarah shot back, swallowing thickly. Frustration hung in the air, a coiled snake ready to strike. "Try the windows." One by one, they rushed to the windows, slamming their fists against the glass, desperation heightening their movements. But each pane remained sealed, like the walls wanted them trapped, confined to the nightmare that loomed ever closer. As they reconvened at the front door, the tapping from below began again. It was rhythmic but insistent, a steady drumming that mimicked their own racing hearts. They were not alone. They could feel it now, it was no longer a figment of their imagination. Something waited in that darkness, something malevolent and hungry. "Let us check the basement again," Jason pulled away from the group, his voice shaking but with a spark of reckless energy. "We need to know what is happening." "Are you insane?" Tim shouted back, eyes wide with fear. There could be something down there. But curiosity mingled with terror. Something about the message on the floor burned in their minds like a brand. Who or what wrote it? Every instinct screamed for them to flee, yet their bodies betrayed them, propelled by a desire to uncover the truth. "Okay," Sarah finally said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Let us go back, but we stick together. No one gets left behind." As they descended into the bowels of the house again, the shadows closed in, hungry and expectant. This time, the air was thick with foreboding, each breath a labor of dread. The basement felt alive, pulsing like a heartbeat that quickened in response to their presence. "Stay close," she whispered, stealing glances down the dark expanse. The flickering light above buzzed ominously, creating flashes of silhouettes that vanished before they could be perceived. But as they stepped further into the basement, the strange tapping grew louder, morphing into an eerie chant. It was almost melodic, taunting them with its twisted beauty. Suddenly, the door slammed shut above them, cutting off their only escape. The chilling sensation hit them all at once, a deep, penetrating fear that clawed at their insides. And through the thick darkness, they heard it again, the voice, clearer now, wrapping around them like a tightening noose. "Get out, leave this place." In that moment, clarity struck. Whatever they were dealing with wasn't just a prank. This basement held secrets darker than they had ever imagined, and each of their fates was entwined with the whispers buried in its shadows. "Run!" Sarah shouted, but the command felt futile as the music of dread crescendoed, echoing off the walls. Would they make it out alive, or had they unwittingly awakened something that would never let them leave? The answer loomed as they fumbled in the dark, clinging to the hope that dawn would break, a dawn that felt impossibly far away. The darkness swallowed them, an all-consuming beast eager to snuff out their hope. Panic surged like a hot wave, but Sarah's instincts kicked in. "To the other side!" she shouted, though she could barely hear her own voice over the crescendo of whispers and the booming pulse of their hearts. Jason, his face pale and eyes wide, gripped her arm. "Do you really think we'll find a way out down here?" he asked, breathless. "Trust me," she replied, trying to keep her own fear at bay. They moved together, desperation fueling their frantic search for something, anything that might lead to escape. Tim stumbled ahead, his flashlight beam flickering like their resolve. "Over here," he called, pointing. As they closed in, they discovered a wall lined with grotesque symbols the same as the ones etched in stone at the entrance of the house. "Great, more weird drawings," Tim muttered, his voice coated in dread. They shifted closer, squinting at the intricate patterns that twisted like vines, their shapes reminding Sarah of limbs grasping for something unseen. A chill trickled down her spine. "Do you think these mean something?" she whispered, trying to suppress the trembling in her voice. "Maybe," Jason began, eyes scanning the area, but he was cut short as a chilling gust of wind whipped through the basement, slamming against their backs and pushing them forward. They stumbled, colliding with the cold concrete wall. "Guys, we need to go," Tim urged, looking over his shoulder in panic. But fear held them rooted for a moment longer, waiting for their next move. Just then, the chant grew louder, rising above the silence like a mad symphony. It echoed through the basement, resonating within their bones. Each note felt like ice creeping through their veins, as if the shadows themselves were singing a sinister lullaby. Sarah felt the world spinning, a sickening realization creeping into her mind. What if we're not supposed to leave?" she said, trembling. "Don't say that," Jason shouted, his voice cracking. But deep down, they all felt at the heavy weight of something ancient, something that had been waiting. Then, a piercing shriek rang out, shattering the air like glass. It came from the far corner of the room, where the darkness appeared to thicken. They turned as one, dread creeping in as the shadows began to ripple and shape into something human or almost human. "Was that?" Sarah began, her breath catching. "Hurry, let us go. We can get past it," Tim urged, scrambling backward, slipping in the dark. He grabbed Sarah's arm to pull her along, but she couldn't tear her gaze away from the figure emerging from the shadows. That it was a woman, her face shrouded in dark hair, her expression void of life, as if she was caught between this world and the next. "Leave," she rasped, barely above a whisper, but the impact sent a jolt of terror through them. "Go. Now!" Jason shouted, and this time, fear propelled them into action. They raced toward the stairwell, but the woman's voice echoed in their minds, an insistent reminder of the ominous threat that loomed behind them. As they reached the stairs, a violent rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. The shadows seemed to surge forward, closing in on their escape. Just when they thought they had made it, the door at the top slammed shut with a deafening boom, echoing in their ears as they stumbled back, horror-stricken. "Why won't it open?" Tim cried, banging on it with his fists, panic rising like bile in his throat. But it remained a solid barrier, trapping them in the darkness. "Look!" Jason shouted, pointing toward another doorway in the far corner, one they hadn't noticed before. It was cracked open, faint light spilling through, an undeniable invitation amid the chaos. Could it lead outside? Sarah wondered, hope mingling with fear. With every instinct screaming to move, they sprinted toward it, but the silhouette of the woman loomed larger behind them, her voice growing louder. Leave. The decision weighed heavy. Would they dare enter the unknown, or confront the entity chasing them? As they reached the door, the air thickened. Their hearts racing faster than ever before, but behind them, the shadows coiled tighter, a grip both icy and unyielding. Their moment of choice had arrived. Would they break free or succumb to the darkness? With breath held tightly in their chests, they pushed through the door, hoping it would lead to salvation, that dawn would finally break. But instead, darkness awaited them on the other side. The walls began whispering again, and the chant grew louder. The moment had come. What would they find? They stumbled into the next room, hearts racing, eyes adjusting to the dim glow surrounding them. It was disorienting, slick with shadows that danced at the edges of their vision. The air felt thicker, almost electric, tinged with an eerie vibrato that sent shivers down their spines. "Is this a hallway?" Tim whispered, glancing back nervously at the door they had just come through. The walls were lined with crude paintings that gnawed at their sanity. Eyes, mouths, limbs, a collage of horror trapped in time. The whispers wrapped around them like a snake ready to constrict. Sarah shuddered, a jolt of cold realization hitting her. This place is wrong. Everything about it's wrong. Jason's breathing quickened. We can't just stand here. We need to find another way out. But as they moved cautiously ahead, a deep rumble echoed from behind, causing the ground beneath them to tremble. A portrait hanging on the wall flickered erratically, as if alive. The eyes seemed to follow their every move. Suddenly, they heard a low growl reverberating through the air, a force that churned in their bellies with instinctive fear. What was that? Sarah gasped, stealing furtive glances at Jason and Tim. Tim's flashlight suddenly dimmed, flickering in and out like his wavering resolve. This is insane. We need to go back. He turned, but the door was gone, replaced by bare wall. What the hell? It was right there. No, no. Don't freak out. Jason grabbed Tim's shoulder, forcing him to focus. We need to push forward. There has to be a way out. We've come this far and he was right. They couldn't turn back. Not now, not with the growl tightening like a vice around their minds. With shaky breaths, they continued down the hallway, every step echoing eerily like a countdown to doom. Then, just ahead, a light flickered. Hope ignited in Sarah's chest. Look! There's something. She pointed toward a doorway, more illuminated than the rest. But as they approached, the growl intensified into a roar, reverberating through their bones, each note pulling them further into despair. An icy fear clamped around Sarah's heart. It's a trap. It wants us to go in. We can't go back. Jason shouted, voice charged with urgency. If we don't keep moving, we'll be swallowed whole. With those words weighing heavy, they pushed through the threshold, bursting into an expansive room. It felt like stepping into a nightmare. The space was filled with ancient artifacts, twisted sculptures, and a vast crimson rug that seemed to swallow the light. But it wasn't the room that stole their breath. It was what they saw in the center. A stone altar, darkened with age, glimmering with a sinister energy. Resting on it was an item, a small, ornate box pulsating with a faint, enigmatic light. What is that? Tim breathed, entranced. The corners of his mouth twitched toward a sickly smile, as if the object called to him. No. We shouldn't touch it. Sarah cried, instinctively stepping back. It could be dangerous. Jason narrowed his eyes, skepticism mixing with dread. But it might be the key to getting out of here. Or to understanding what this place is. In that moment, the air grew thick with tension, two desires clashing. The temptation to reach for the unknown and the instinct to flee from it. Shadows cowered in the corners, as if waiting for their choice. The growl echoed again, more menacing now, rattling their resolve. What if we take it? Tim's voice cracked. What if it's our only way to survive? Or our way to doom ourselves? Sarah shot back, heart racing. The pulse of the box grew stronger, almost alive. The walls leaned in as shadows flickered ominously around them. Would they dare to risk everything for the unknown? Questions buzzed through their heads, melding with the growl that wouldn't go away. As they stood poised on the edge of a decision, a low chant resonated around them, louder, more insistent. With every passing second, the room blurred, time liquefied under the pressure of their impending choice. Do we trust it? Jason whispered, dread and curiosity warping his voice, before they could answer. The ground beneath them lurched. The walls began to pulse dangerously, closing in. Their moment of indecision had arrived, but time was slipping through their fingers like sand. Would the box hold the answer, or would it lead to their demise? And just like that, they were faced with the ultimate choice, one that would shatter their souls or lead them to an escape they desperately needed. What would they choose? The walls throbbed, vibrating with an energy that pushed against Sarah's chest, making it hard to breathe. The chanting grew louder, wrapping around them like a tangible force, pulling them toward the altar. Tim took a step forward, entranced. It wants us to take it, it's beautiful. His eyes were wide, reflecting the strange light of the box. No. Tim, wait. Sarah shouted, heart hammering in her ears. She reached out to grab his arm, but Jason was already moving to the altar, curiosity igniting a spark in his eyes. "Just a quick look," he said, voice calm yet firm. "Maybe this can explain everything." But the growl morphed into a snarl, more terrifying than any nightmare. It reverberated through the room, shaking the dust from the ceiling. "Get away from it!" Sarah screamed, urgency driving her to grab Jason's shoulder, pulling him back. "This isn't what we think it is." Yet seduction clung to the air, an invisible thread tugging at their will. Tim, unblinking, stepped closer to the box. "We don't understand what's at stake. Maybe it can save us or free us." "No." Jason snapped, shoving Tim back. "We have to look out for each other. That thing could be a source of all this madness." His voice was resolute, yet trembled slightly. The moment grew thick with tension, the kind that makes the air feel heavy and electric. Each second stretched, thickening their dread as the shadows shifted like restless spirits. "Then what do we do?" Tim's voice cracked, the bravado fading. "We can't just stay here." Suddenly, the box pulsed again, a heartbeat echoing in the silence. It called out, almost crying to be held. All three moved, hesitant feet mixing with uncertain hearts, the tightness in their throats increasing. "Just one touch," Jason whispered, almost hypnotized. "Just to see what it feels like," but Sarah shook her head fiercely. "No. We can't afford any mistakes. If this is a trap, we need to find a way out." The shadows flickered violently, as the growl transformed into a roar that lit up the walls with an ominous glow, revealing grotesque forms in the paintings that wriggled as if alive. Eyes stared at them with hunger, mouths twisted in desperate silent screams. "We need to decide," Tim pleaded, fear boiling over now. Sarah felt her heart pounding against her ribcage, a war between the fight for survival and the seduction of the unknown. Just give me a second," she gasped, closing her eyes, trying to siphon clarity from the chaos. The chanting fluctuated, a cacophony of voices rising and falling like a tidal wave ready to crash. In that moment, something shifted. The altar began to shimmer, the box glowing brighter. The chanting reached a fever pitch, weaving into a single phrase that resonated in their bones: "Take or leave. What if it's a literal choice?" Tim's voice blared through Sarah's thoughts. "What do we gain by leaving? Or what do we lose by taking?" Jason's expression turned around, caught between fear and resolve. "Either way, we might not survive. We're running out of time." A tremor shook the ground beneath them, splintering the floor with cracks that seemed to whisper terrible secrets. Reality twisted, and before them, visions flared, shadows of what might happen with a touch, what curses they would bring, what potencies they might unleash. "Make your choice." The growl transformed, crackling like thunder through the trembling air. Instinctively, Sarah reached out to clutch Tim's arm. "We can't let fear decide for us." But her voice was drowned out as the altar erupted with energy, a blinding flash, swirling shadows encasing them. But just before the brilliance swallowed them whole, the box lifted into the air, suspended, waiting. Would they grasp it, tempting fate? Or flee the doom that loomed behind them? And in that terrible moment of hesitation, the ground shook once more, breaking apart as ominous echoes warned them: choosing silence may be the loudest choice of all. A blinding light enveloped them, and just like that, reality twisted. Sarah felt the fabric of existence rip apart and reweave itself, her senses reeling like a roller coaster that had just taken a steep dive. Time stood still. With a deafening crack, the altar exploded into a storm of shadows and colors, and the blinding light dispersed, replaced by darkness that pressed against them. Out of the chaos, Sarah could hear their heartbeats synchronizing, a frantic thrum in the silence. "Is everyone okay?" Jason's voice wavered, as raw and uncertain as the tremors still thrumming beneath their feet. I'm shaken," Tim replied, his voice barely above a whisper, dawning realization surfacing. "Where are we?" The darkness slowly receded, revealing an endless expanse layered in fog and despair. They were no longer in the stone room, but somewhere much darker, an abyss, vast and airless, feeling like they had been dropped into a void. "Look!" Sarah pointed. Ahead of them, the shadows coalesced, forming twisted shapes that seemed to mock them. The echoes of their earlier voices lingered in the distance, bouncing off invisible walls. "Take, or leave. Where did that thing go?" Jason asked, scanning their surroundings, his shoulders tense, ready for whatever horror might materialize. "I don't know," Tim replied, dread pooling in his gut. "Did we fail the test?" As he spoke, the darkness quivered. Murmurs began to swirl around them, whispers of despair, fear, and anguish. They were voices, pleading and taunting all at once, curling around the trio like shadows that refused to leave. "We shouldn't have tried to touch it," Sarah said, panic creeping into her voice. I knew something felt wrong. I was curious." Tim shot back, frustration boiling over. "Maybe we were supposed to take it. What if it could have saved us?" "Enough!" Jason interjected, his eyes darting. "Arguing won't help us now. We need to find a way out." Just then, the ground shifted violently, and before they could react, a figure emerged from the swirling darkness, tall and cloaked. It carried a weight of shadows, revealing glowing eyes that pierced through the haze. "Welcome," it hissed, voice smooth yet dripping with malice. "You've entered the realm of choices. What do you want from us?" Sarah yelled, trying to summon courage that felt dangerously thin. "To witness," the figure replied, delighting in the tension that had thickened the air. "To know if you can face the darkness you've invited in." Without warning, the shadows around them morphed, revealing grotesque scenes of their greatest fears. Tim saw his family torn apart, Jason faced a future of isolation, and Sarah witnessed visions of betrayal, each one more horrifying than the last. "No!" Tim shouted, shaking his head, as if denying the images would make them disappear. "This isn't real. Isn't it?" The figure leaned closer, nearly breathing dark into their faces. "You have until dawn to free yourselves or surrender to despair." "Free ourselves?" Sarah echoed, confusion crashing against the rising tide of terror. "How can we do that?" The figure chuckled darkly, the sound echoing like cracks of ice. "Making a choice can be burdensome or freeing. Decide wisely." With that, the darkness deepened, swallowing the figure whole, leaving only their rasping laughter to echo through the abyss. Tensions flared again, the group huddled closer. "What do we do?" Tim asked, eyes wide with panic. The weight of uncertainty pressed around them like a vice. "Whatever we choose, we need to make it together," Jason declared, voice ringing with newfound resolve. "We're stronger united." As they took a collective breath, another tremor rocked the ground, and the whispers crescendoed, threatening to drown them. But just beyond the reach of the shadows, a faint light flickered, beckoning them forward. "Together," Sarah whispered, a spark of hope igniting in her chest. But as they began to move, the swirling darkness roared in defiance, growling like a beast ready to snap. Would the light hold the answer they so desperately sought? And just as they stepped closer, something ancient stirred in the shadows. What awaited them at the edge of the darkness? The light flickered like a dying star, its warmth drawing them closer, yet the shadows fought back, gripping at their ankles like desperate hands. Sarah felt the pull of that light. It was faint but undeniable, a promise in the darkness. "Stay close," Jason commanded, his voice a firm anchor in the storm of panic. They shuffled forward, blending their fears into a shared purpose. Each step felt heavier, weighed down by the specters of their nightmares swirling around them. Tim glanced back into the darkness, and for a moment, it felt alive, pulsating like a massive heartbeat. "What do we do if we face our fears?" he whispered, guilt shadowing his features as he stumbled over his own thoughts. What if we can't?" "Then we'll face it together," Sarah said, desperation threading through her voice. "We can't let it tear us apart." The light didn't waver as they approached, but it felt like a gate to something greater or something worse. Sarah stretched her fingers towards it, longing pouring through her veins. Just as her fingertips brushed the radiant glow, the whispers morphed into angry shrieks, pulling her back into uncertainty. No. Don't let it take you. A voice screeched from somewhere deep within the shadows. The agony in its tone tugged at her heart, and Sarah hesitated. What if the darkness was right? What if the light was just another trap? Suddenly, the ground convulsed again, and a figure re-emerged, this time twice as menacing. Its glowing eyes shifted toward them, casting a cold beam into their depths. Heroes or fools? Choose, little ones, it taunted. Jason clenched his fists, trying to stand tall against the menacing presence. We choose to fight. He shouted, the declaration echoing bright against the gloom. We want to let you trap us in despair. Fight? How quaint, the figure crooned, its voice dripping with mockery. Then let us see how far your courage truly extends. With a snap of its fingers, the air thickened, and shapes formed from the shadows, dark phantoms of their fears. Each one took a life of its own, creeping closer as if merging with the darkness that surrounded them. Tim recoiled, catching sight of a shadow that twisted into his worst nightmare, his family engulfed in flames, their voices shrieking for help. No! He screamed, collapsing to his knees, hands clutching his head. No, it can't be real. Tim, don't give in. Sarah urged, fear crashing through her voice. It's a lie. Fight it. She grabbed his shoulder, shaking him, hoping to dispel the darkness, but as she did, images of betrayal flickered before her. Jason turning his back, shamelessly abandoning her in her moment of need. Panic squeezed her chest. No. Sarah cried out, breaking free from Tim's stranglehold on her heart. You're not real. The figure laughed, a sound that rattled her bones. They are only as real as your fear allows. Desperation turned to determination. Jason took Sarah's arm, and Tim, still shaking, found the strength to rise. Together, they formed a circle, tension winding tighter as they faced the shadows closing in. Together, Jason declared again, a battle cry pushing through the fear. We have each other. As they focused on their unity, the light flickered brightly, illuminating their faces. The shadows hesitated, recoiling from their resolve. The ground beneath them surged with energy, and as they held hands tighter, a fierce wind swirled around them, pushing back against the darkness. With a roar, the shadows shrieked, their shapes writhing in confusion. Yet even as the light surged, Sarah felt a chill creep back into her heart. Even if we push them back, what comes next? The answer hung in the air, a question too monstrous to voice. Would it mean the return of the figure? Or worse, the unveiling of a new horror lurking just beyond the light? And as that thought settled in their minds, the ground trembled once more, throwing them off balance. The abyss yawned open beneath them, revealing depths of darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. What emerged from that void would challenge everything they believed. The ground beneath them let out a deep, bone-rattling growl, echoing through the chamber of shadows. Sarah's heart raced, a wild drum in her chest, as the abyss gaped wider, seemingly seething with a sinister life of its own. The light flickered above, wavering as if unsure whether it should battle the encroaching darkness or succumb to it. Hold on! Jason shouted, gripping Sarah's and Tim's hands tighter. We can't let go. His voice was a lifeline, but doubt seeped into Sarah's mind. What if their grip wasn't enough? From the churning depths, figures began to rise, twisting in grotesque forms, merging with the dread that pulsed through the air. Tim's eyes widened, terror making him tremble. What are they? He whispered. Shadows of our fears, Sarah replied, forcing her voice to sound steady. We have to remember they're just illusions. But the closer the new horrors came, the harder it was to believe. She spotted a figure cloaked in flames, its face familiar, her brother, engulfed in anguish. No. Stay back. She cried, flinching away. The shadows whispered her insecurities, feeding off her panic. What if I don't measure up? Echoed a voice that sounded just like her own, almost mocking. What if I lose everything? Don't listen. They're just lies. Jason shouted. But with each second that passed, the flame-faced wraith moved closer, and she could feel its heat singe the air. Tim fell to his knees, overwhelmed as a spectre morphed into his greatest regret, a vision of his parents, their disappointed faces etched in shadows. I'm not strong enough. He wept, his voice barely a whisper. The pull of despair reached out to him, a siren song promising the comfort of surrender. No, Tim. We're stronger together. Sarah shouted, trying to anchor him. It felt like a losing battle, and the light dimmed with every moment they hesitated. In that split second, the figure stepped closer, its glowing gaze piercing through the chaos. You think bravery can save you? It sneered, a twisted grin spreading across its shadowy features. Look where bravery has led you, down to this festering pit of despair. Jason pushed forward, fervor igniting his gaze as he shouted again, we won to let you win. An electrifying energy surged around him as he mustered the strength of his friends, pulling them with him to stand tall, locking their arms in a tighter circle. They had to believe in each other, believe that hope existed even here. Slowly, the flickering light branched out like a beacon, illuminating the grotesque vision surrounding them, pushing them back into the dark void. But just as the shadows retreated, a thunderous roar erupted from the darkness. You think this is over? The figure's voice reverberated ominously. You've only scratched the surface of your fears. This is merely an interlude. Stay with me, Jason murmured, squeezing Sarah's hand. The warmth of connection felt stable against the tempest. Then, a deafening silence fell, a thick, weighted pause hung in the air, wrapping them in uncertainty. As the shadows skittered away into the chasm, they felt an unsettling calm wash over them. But the ground trembled violently again, the darkness swirling in on itself. And then, before them, shadows congealed into something far more sinister than what they had faced so far, a form too vast to comprehend, hidden in the depths they thought they had escaped. What is that? Sarah gasped, dread creeping back into her heart as she stared wide-eyed into the abyss. The air shifted, heavy with an ominous presence ready to reveal its intent. And suddenly, they realized they weren't just facing their fears, they were facing the shadows of something more monstrous than any of them could have imagined. What it wanted would unravel everything they held dear. Was escaping the abyss truly possible, or had they only awakened something far worse? The darkness pulsated like a living creature, each throb echoing a heartbeat too slow and too sinister. Sarah's mind raced. What was this new terror? An abomination from their worst nightmares? The ground shook with a ferocity that sent them stumbling. Jason gripped her hand tighter, but even his resolve felt shaky against the impending calamity. Tim! Sarah yelled, her voice breaking through the dread. Get up! We need to stand together. But as she turned, she saw him, frozen in place, eyes wide and unblinking, lost in a trance of helplessness. Tim! Snap out of it! Jason shouted, his gaze darting back and forth between Tim and the looming shadow. It loomed ever closer, a mass with shapes shifting unpredictably, dark claws lengthening into spiked extensions that threatened. In the eerie glow of the chamber, its features began to sharpen, revealing twisted, tortured faces within faces that bore the anguish of countless lost souls. Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. It feeds on our fears. She blurted out, and the truth gripped her as a frigid fear washed over her. They had to conquer this thing, not just for themselves but to save Tim from that suffocating despair. There's got to be something we can do. Jason shouted, desperation spilling over. We have to push back. Together. Sarah shouted, mustering every ounce of courage. She felt the warmth of Jason's hand, anchoring her fraying spirits. What if we confront it? What if we name our fears? The shadow shifted, reacting to their defiance. You think words have power over me? Its voice hissed, chilling her from the inside. You are but specks of dust, and I am the storm. No. Tim cried suddenly, shaking his head as if awakening from a nightmare. I can't let this win. I can't. His resolve jolted Sarah like electricity. That's it, Tim. Speak out. What are you afraid of? With trembling lips, Tim finally yelled out, I'm afraid of being alone. Of never being enough. The moment he said it, the shadow recoiled slightly, as if his words were daggers slicing through the inky darkness. One by one, Sarah and Jason followed suit, their voices blending into a united front. I'm afraid of losing everything I love. Sarah shouted, feeling empowerment surge through her. I'm scared of never seeing my brother again. With every confession, the horrifying shape flickered, revealing cracks of brilliant light peeking through the crevices. It seemed to writhe in pain as if their honesty was burning it from within. Now! Jason yelled, a fierce determination igniting in his eyes. Together! And they launched forward, arms linked, with the light pouring from their declarations, illuminating the grotesque chamber around them. The colossal shadow shrieked, a sound that resonated like 1,000 souls wailing in unison, but it retreated, disintegrating into tendrils of black mist. Yet, before they could relax, a terrifying quaking sent them sprawling back. The very fabric of the chamber twisted violently, a strong whirl of chaos that seemed to want to swallow them once more. What now? Tim gasped, scrambling to regain footing. A new form began to emerge, twisting into a vaguely familiar shape, something more concrete than the shadows they had conquered. A face began to materialize, eyes clearer and more sinister, with a knowing smirk that made Sarah's blood run cold. It's not just your fears anymore, it taunted. You've awakened the true nightmare. Are you ready for the real test? A crushing realization settled heavy in Sarah's chest. The darkness hadn't been vanquished, it had only been provoked. With every breath, the air thickened, the shadows conspiring. They were far from safe, and whatever reality awaited them beyond this chaos was ready to shatter everything they had ever known. Could they survive the next wave of terror, or had they signed up for their own undoing? The shadows swirled in frantic anger, howling like a tempest that had awakened from a slumber long feared. Sarah's heart raced, each pulse a frantic whisper in her ears, racing faster as the familiar face emerged from the swirling darkness. It was her brother, the one she had lost, the one she had faced every day in her dreams. He stood there, twisted by agony and despair. You couldn't save me, Sarah, he whispered, his voice cracking like glass. You only let me down. No. She fought back tears, despair flooding her thoughts like an avalanche. You're not real. She reached for him, but the ground split apart beneath her feet. Tim and Jason moved closer, forming an anchor against the flood of doubt threatening to drown them. Jason clutched Sarah's hand tighter, determination swirling behind the fear in his eyes. This isn't him. It's feeding off our pain. We need to stand firm. But Tim faltered, a doubt creeping into his heart. What if this time we can't fight it off? No. Sarah shouted, summoning every ounce of courage, piercing through the shadows that threatened to snuff out their hope. We've made it this far. We can't give up now. With instinct pulsing through her, she stood tall in the face of her fears. You're not real. You can't hurt me. She screamed at the apparition, her voice echoing louder than the chaos. You're just darkness trying to cover the light. The shadow shrieked, jagged energy whipping through the air, but she felt something shift. The light flickered back, burning bright enough to scare off the monsters that lingered. Jason stepped forward, his voice a beacon. Tim, this is your chance. Face it. What are you truly scared of? Tim hesitated, glancing back at the illusion nearly consuming him. I can't lose you guys. I can't. Then fight for us. Jason urged. You have the strength. Remember, we're in this together. Together, Sarah echoed. Tim's voice broke through the dread. I'm scared I'll never be enough for my family. The shadow recoiled, and for a moment, the form of his parents faded behind the grasping tendrils of darkness. I just want to feel like I matter. The swirling grew less aggressive, and a crack of light burst forth, illuminating the figures in the room. A swirl of joyous memories flickered alive, like a fire stoked in the heart. Never breaking their circle, the three propelled themselves further into the light. "I'm scared of losing sight of what matters most," Jason yelled, forcing the words from deep down. "Yes. Every time I worry I want to be good enough," Sarah cried out in unity, her voice piercing through the fear surrounding them. "I'm afraid of losing all of you." The shadow writhed in pain, the tormented faces within fluctuating in and out like flickering flames. "We need to trust each other. Together," Tim shouted, his voice booming through the shadows. They raised their voices once more, the three surrendering to their vulnerabilities, igniting the sparks that fueled their unity. "I'm not going to let fear win." The black mass faltered, pulled back, as light erupted from where their hands were clasped. Illuminated images of laughter and warmth surged forward as they pushed through, finding strength in the bonds that claimed their fears as their own. "Let us break," Jason shouted. With fierce determination, they charged at the thickening fog of darkness together. The shadows shrieked in agony, shattering into 1,000 flickering shards of memory, each vanishing into the depths. The figure, a culmination of all their fears, cried out in frustration, its form growing smaller as the light engulfed it, revealing the truth hidden within. Then, just like that, they were outside, breathless and trembling. They found themselves standing beneath a dawn-soaked sky, where dawn broke golden and bright. The cool breeze healed their burning skin, washing away the remnants of their nightmare. "Is it over?" Tim asked, the exhaustion settling over them like a heavy blanket. "I think so," Jason replied, scanning their surroundings. The old house now seemed harmless, cradled in sunlight instead of secrets. Sarah's heart soared. "We did it. We faced the darkness and came out stronger." Tears threatened to spill, not just from fear, but from relief. In that moment, they knew not just that they had escaped but that they had discovered an unbreakable bond beneath the weight of their worst fears. "Let us promise to never lose sight of each other again, no matter what happens." Sarah felt washed over with warmth. The connections built in that dark chamber would forever light their way. Together, holding hands, they walked toward the new day, laughter mingling through the air, knowing they had conquered far more than nightmares. They had come to understand the true meaning of strength. As they left the old house behind them, they felt lighter, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And remember, if you enjoyed this spine-chilling journey, now is the time to stand up and show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss out on the next exclusive stories that are coming your way. Smash that like button now. It's your way to feed the algorithm and keep us rolling. I want to hear from you, so flood the comments section below with your reactions and theories about the ending. What do you think happened? And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and join this amazing adventure. This is the moment to be part of something special, because only true fans know how much every action counts.